Hi golfers, Rob Cheney here from GOLFTEC Singapore. Today's video we're going to discuss a particular move in the swing that separates golfers of different skill levels fairly significantly. The best players, all of them, are doing this, and those of you struggling with your ball striking, probably not. So this week's video was inspired by my very good friend and mentor, Andy Plummer from Stack and Tilt. Andy has been a great friend and influence on my coaching for a number of years now. And Andy was on a podcast this week, which you can find by searching for 51 Strokes podcast. I'd encourage you to spend an hour, go find that podcast, go listen to it, educate your brain and learn a little bit more about the Stack and Tilt system from the man himself. And what Andy said in there, one of the things he said in this podcast was discussed how far forwards, or for a right-handed golfer, how far to the left the hips move throughout the time and space of the golf swing. And he made the point that the best players do that faster, sooner and more than the poorer player, who would tend to be stuck more on their back foot and not really understand how those hips should move forward. And here at GOLFTEC, we identify this as being an incredibly important part of the swing as well. Two of the motion measurements that we use and were part of the Swing True Motion study was the difference between the hip sway number at impact between the best players and the poorest players. And one of the consequences of how you move your hips and how you sway your hips is how much shoulder tilt you can create at impact. And that was another measurement which we found to have a high correlation in terms of differentiating golfers of different skill levels. So I'm going to talk today about the hips, how they move forwards, give you a drill that you can do, whether you're stuck at home and locked down or whether you're able to get to the driving range. I'm hoping this drill can help you. So where the weight is, and more specifically where the pelvis is throughout the swing, has a massive influence on one of the very first fundamentals: contact, striking the ball well. And as I touched on, you'll see the better players have their hips more forwards when they hit the ball, and that continues into the finish. And you'll see golfers who struggle making good, consistent contact, more on their back foot, leaning back, tipping back, twisting their hips in the wrong direction. So I think it's really important to take this piece and just isolate the lower part of your body, the hips, and learn how they move forward during the downswing, while the upper center, or your sternum, if you like, here stays pretty stable, to allow us to create those two things I discussed just a second ago. The hip sway or the hip slide more towards the target, which then creates more shoulder tilt. It helps to shallow out the angle of attack and improve the overall ball striking. So this is a part of the swing that I'm not quite sure everyone fully appreciates. Most golfers would begin to understand that better players have their weight more on the front foot when they hit the ball, but they're probably not so clearly aware of how they do that. The pelvis and the hip girdle moving forwards or to the left happens the soonest and the most in the best players. And conversely, golfers who struggle with contact, struggle with swing direction, struggle with all the standard stuff that we would see from day to day, never get their weight far enough forwards or far enough to the left. Certainly not soon enough, and if it does happen, as I say, it's always too late. But I don't often see anyone ever get that far to the left. They spend most of their time hanging back. So having an understanding that your hips, this pelvis, moves so much to the left between where you start your swing and where you finish your swing, I think is really useful information and could massively improve your ball striking and your overall consistency. If you take the time to listen to the podcast that I mentioned at the beginning of this video, you'll hear Andy discuss how the movement of the hips or the pelvis in the golf swing is, as he describes it, the holy grail. So I think when someone of that quality and caliber of golf instruction says something like that, we should probably pay attention. This diagram here that I'm showing you on the screen is plotting the center of the pelvis in an expert golfer from P1 to P7. P1 being the setup and P7 being impact. And really what we're trying to highlight here, what this image is saying, is that the center of a golfer's pelvis never moves back in the more expert players. I've even seen recent gears footage of Bryson DeChambeau, and again, the center of his pelvis when measured on gears, which is an extremely accurate measurement device for how the body moves, it's showing how the center of his pelvis moves forward in the backswing and then more forward on the downswing and into the finish. And I would say that that is pretty important information. I've gone ahead and set up the Tour Striker plane station just on my left side here with a noodle 6 to 8 inches left of my side, left of my left hip. And what I'm going to suggest you guys do, and again, you don't need to have this exact station to do this exercise. You could do this standing 6 to 8 inches away from a tabletop or a wall or a door frame. You could do this at the driving range with your golf bag if you positioned it carefully. And what you want to do without the ball to begin with is just from a standing start, from a static position at the beginning, just move your hips all the way to the left as far as you can until you're touching that pool noodle or the door frame or whatever it is you're using. So there's no attempt there to turn my body at all. I'm just moving my hips as far to the left as I possibly can. It's creating this shoulder tilt, which is massively important, and again, a differentiator between better players and poorer players. And then once your left hip is touching the noodle, you can begin to turn, and you want then for your belt buckle to reach out and touch the noodle. So at the end of this drill, the piece of my body furthest forwards, closest to the target, the piece of my body the furthest forward is my belly or my belt buckle. This means I've moved my hips to the left the most, turn them, and I'm extending my spine as well to create lots of height and good distance on my shot. So as mentioned, we can use this as a dry drill exercise. We can do this slowly without the ball. But if you do have access to a driving range or the ability to hit shots indoors, you can actually take this drill one stage further and start using shots, punching balls out there, beginning to move into full swings, using the noodle, whatever I've got positioned to the left of me here, to feel like I move my pelvis towards, more towards, and push my hips in the finish. Nice contact. Just chipping little 8-irons out there to start with. Really getting the sense of how I want to keep my pelvis moving towards the target, particularly in the transition of the swing. Really solid, nice straight shot, punching it out there. It's funny actually, I was on the course with a friend of mine the other day doing an on-course lesson, and he had to play a shot from through the trees, and we talked about a punch shot and how we wanted to keep the weight more forward, and we laugh and joke actually about how well he hits the ball when he's trying to punch it. There's no coincidence there on my part. I think most golfers would benefit hugely from feeling like almost all of their swings with the irons are more of a punch shot, where they get that weight forward. They have somewhat of that flying wedge that I've talked about in previous videos. They're able to make a really nice solid contact with the ball, and it just helps them. If their intention is to punch, then they're more likely to be more forward sooner, which is really the message that I'm trying to get across in this video. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found the video informative, but most of all useful and practical, something you could take out to the range, or as I was saying, can even do at home. I'm going to link the podcast that I was mentioning earlier that Andy was speaking in. I'll link that in the description of the video. Let me know if you take time to listen to that and give me your feedback on how much you enjoyed that, what you thought of it, and if you have any questions about any of the stuff that Andy was talking about in the podcast or anything that I've mentioned today in this video. Thanks as ever for tuning in. Stick to the plan, follow the process, do the drills, and better ball striking is just around the corner. Take care everyone, look after yourselves, and I'll see you next week.